Hi, so my name's Tristan Bray from opportunitytoheal.com. I've been a regression therapist, counsellor and coach for 11 years now. And one of the main things that I've seen over the years when it comes to the biggest problems that people want to work on is basically around pretty intense trauma. And so this has led me to do a lot of research into this area, in particular, and how to heal it on a lot of different levels. I do regression, but I do coaching and counselling too, and help with trauma in the family trauma as well. So I feel like the biggest issue in our country is based around sexual trauma, physical assault, that sort of thing, and also the shame that's projected at that trauma from the particularly here in Australia, the Christian fundamental construct, or like you could look at churches as a sexual regulation society, and how the church actually historically has been projecting a lot of shame onto people. And even though we're not actually directly exposed to these religions, most people anyway, we still suffer from the inherited cultural negative emotions around our bodies. So that's the thing I do, and I do workshops and stuff like that. And so tonight we're going to talk about a bunch of things that are taboo subjects. Yeah.
So what's the general consensus in society with taboo subjects, and how is that linked to shame?
All right. So in our culture, there's a lot of things that we don't usually talk about. And the way I like to describe this is often we inherit these sorts of things when we're little kids, usually before the age of six, and we look at our grandparents and our parents, and we look at the sort of things they're comfortable with, And from an early age, we actually have a lot of subtle projected shame around our sexualities, which leads to adults that have basically issues with being in a human body on a lot of levels. One of the really simple things is, if you look at homosexuality, what is homosexuality without fundamental Christianity? It's not really even a thing. It's not really even a problem anymore, because if you look at these sorts of religions like Judeo-Christian and Muslim religious taboos, they often project a lot of the negative emotions onto these sorts of things of people's sexuality. So without these religions, we can actually be a lot more free and a lot more innocent, as opposed to holding this epigenetic, multi-generational negative emotion around our bodies. Yeah, like most women in our culture here in the South Pacific, they've inherited the emotions that their mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers were exposed to when it comes to being in a patriarchal society where men are in control, and a society where there's systematic and subtle misogyny or hatred against women from a very young age. And this leads to a compounding effect often with women around how they feel about their bodies. I don't want to generalize and say this is everyone, but when you get into this sort of trauma, often people's blockage when it comes to actually even just talking about this sort of trauma is because of their concern about what other people think, right? And they're like, if you get someone who's got a mega sexual shame event, like whether it's on social media or something like that. This has happened a lot with these pornography rings around Australia, where children are sharing photos. It's like 70 Australian schools involved with teenagers, boys and stuff, taking photos of their girlfriends and everything like that systematically and posting them online. Now this sort of shame creates a massive amount of trauma and self-loathing in people that are exposed to it. Another example is when it comes to like homosexuality in male youth, when someone finds out, for example, what can often happen is there's actually a really high rate of male youth suicide, because the shame that comes up is so strong that it's easy to kill yourself, right? That's how crazy shame can be for the body on a crippling level. And you got to understand that shame and self-loathing are some of the lowest energetic emotions that humans can experience. They're way worse than anger and things like that. So it's quite a trip, really, to see that, especially in male youth, we have a lot of issues when it comes to these sorts of emotions, and a lot of the sort of peer pressure and systems, the way young men are brought up in our culture, and the way young men are brought up to subtly think it's okay to disrespect women. Yeah. So this sort of conversation comes from the idea that I've looked at these issues in myself, right, and I can see where they come from, and I've put it aside and I can just talk about it. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't want to say I'm not triggered by some things, because that's not true. But what I've noticed, what really helps people, is to actually talk about these things quite freely, because the more we talk about these subjects, the more everyone will start talking about it, and we'll have more of a collective psychic or holographic change in our communities where it becomes normal to talk about your problems. And sometimes the most healing can happen just by talking about these problems, whether it's your friends or family, partner, whatever. Or in families where it's like kids talking to their parents. A lot of kids feel like they can't talk to their parents about sexuality because the kid observes that the parents are suddenly shut down in some way. And it's just like a general consensus, not everyone. And this isn't every culture in the world, but it seems to be an energetic world theme at the moment, which we're waking up from, because it's actually a construct. It's a projection. On a global level, we have an economic system that would go bankrupt without war and destruction, because the economic system needs infinite growth. To have infinite growth, you need to destroy things too. And to get people to hurt each other and to just destroy each other on a political level and on a level of the military or nationalism, sport, school competition, entrepreneurship, sociopathic capitalism, people actually think it's okay to compete with each other and thrive energetically off the demise of other humans, because we're so numb and so disconnected from each other that we can actually think that healthy competition and actually beating down, your competitors is okay. We're taught that from a very young age, So a lot of sort of information is like that, so it's about actually seeing each other as one and helping each other out.